Hi, welcome to Books to Boardrooms with Dr. Kiran. Today we have someone from a CSuite level employee. She is from the banking industry. She works as a COO. And today's interview we are going to talk about the various roles and responsibilities as well as the position in CSuite. So let's welcome Alicia. Thanks Alicia for coming.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me and giving me the opportunity to contribute to your channel and to your students.
Alicia, can you just give a little background about yourself?
And what I do. Right, my name is Alicia. I am a senior C-suite executive in the banking industry. I am also a certified board director and certified to work as an independent director on boards.
So actually, you are a CSuite employee, and I think to be very precise, you are a COO of an organization. Now this particular channel, when I started, it's basically for students across the world to understand certain subject matter. Sometimes, we need to give them a little idea about what are the opportunities they can, the growth aspirations, etc. So we hear quite a lot about CSuite. So I would like to give a little background about what is CSuite, what are the different designations and positions available or is there in the organization. So can you just give a little, throw some lights on that?
Okay, as you rightly mention, that C-suite executives, or they are the main suite of executives in an organization, and they are tasked with very senior roles and responsibilities. And these roles and responsibilities can differ from organization to organization. However, in every organization, you have three basic C-suite functions. That is, the first one is the CEO, which is the Chief Executive Officer. Then you have the COO, which is a Chief Operating Officer. And then you have a CFO, which is a Chief Financial Officer. When using these terminology in everyday language, and I think for anybody coming into the industry or any student that is on any path to go into management, it can be quite daunting. So when you're using CEO, COO, and CFO, and anybody will say, what's that? So I think if we start with the CEO position, your chief executive officer of an organization, he holds the most senior position in any organization. He is appointed by the board or of directors, or in smaller organizations, this would be the owner of the organization. Because the CEO is appointed by the board of directors, he has a sole and direct responsibility for reporting to the board. He's accountable to the board. Arguably, your CEO has a responsibility to manage the roles of the company. If you can take an umbrella view, he has responsibility across all of the functions in the organization. Now, being a very busy individual with all of the responsibilities, they cannot take up the responsibilities of day-to-day operations and financial activities, which is why you have your Chief Operating Officer and your Chief Financial Officer that are appointed. And in the organization, those are probably your three most important. Your Chief Operating Officer is appointed by the CEO. And the Chief Operating Officer he's responsible for the day-to-day, or she is responsible for the day-to-day activities of the organization. What the Chief Operating Officer does is largely dependent on what the board wants and what the CEO wants and what your company needs, as well as what your outside customers need as well. Now, your CFO is tasked with an incredible responsibility to make sure that the financial performance of the company meets the expectations of both board and shareholders. Quite a difficult task, especially when you want to grow an organization, and somebody has to manage the cash flow and make sure that we are delivering the bottom line profitability.
I think it's good you answered three questions of mine. I was about to ask the differentiation between a CEO or who is a CEO, who is a CFO, and who is a COO. So, but from the way you explained in detail in a normal way. So if I may conclude saying that CEO is more of a strategic position or a strategic decision maker, wherein a CEO is an executional position wherein the strategy, because somebody has to execute the strategy the way the company really want to achieve its vision and the mission. So can I say that the person on board or floor who execute things to ensure that everything goes as per the plan, the strategic plan, is that a COO's role?
I would take it a step further and say that everyone in the executive committees or at a C-suite level is responsible for strategy implementation. While the CEO is responsible to make sure that the requirements or the targets are driven through the organization, each C-suite executive has a responsibility to ensure that what the activities that they are doing are all aligned up with the overall strategy of the organization. Because we need to remember that that's what the board wants the organization to achieve, and the CEO himself cannot achieve that. So he needs COO, CFO, and other executives' involvement.
So basically in an organizational hierarchy, if you look at it, the COO, the CFO, and in some organization, depending upon the scale, you have a CMO, you have a CTO, technology officer, chief innovation officer. So these executives report to the CEO, and the CEO further reports to the board.
Correct.
So if I put the other way, now you being a COO, so what are the functions which reports to a COO?
Okay, in any organization, it can be as big as you need it to be, or as little as as small as you need it to be. So in the roles that I am currently in, there's technology, all operational requirements, administration, consumer relations, etc. So it goes, any day of a chief operating officer varies. One day you can be heavily involved in IT, and other days it could be day-to-day operations, it could be working on development of other technology or requirements to meet your customers' needs. So yeah, it's day-to-day activities, and I would say no 2 days are ever the same for a chief operating officer.
So if I can say anything, you leave the finance part out, but the engine of the company has to run based on the supply chain logistics, marketing function, information technology. So ensuring that that is run smooth and soft, as well as improving efficiencies in this area will be the COO's role.
Exactly.
And do you see these roles now become, because at one point of time when the CEO position came, it was only CEO. I mean, the COO was the second fiddle, it came a little later, but nowadays you see the COO position becoming more prominent in every organization. You definitely have a CEO and definitely a CFO and COO. So what made this need? Why it becomes suddenly popular?
Well, I think in any function, you cannot be an expert in absolutely every single subject. So your CEOs are normally hired to do strategy, look after the image of the company and overall communications. Now, you need specialists within the business to be able to apply their skills and knowledge in order to assist the CEO in achieving the organization's objectives.
So what is the career progression for someone? Like I told you, it's basically for the students or people who are really working in maybe in the mid-level or low-level starting of their career. So what is the career progression of someone from you join an organization to become a COO?
Okay, well, I think it's a long process. You've got to be very well versed in technology. You've got to understand you've got to understand operations. You've got to have a broad understanding of logistics. So your knowledge base, I would say, has to be quite broad, but also you need to acknowledge that you won't be the master of absolutely every topic that you're responsible for. However, you need to ensure that, like, you've got the CEO, and then you've got the COO, and that within the chief operating officer's environment, there needs to be suitably qualified and experienced individuals that are all supporting the overall function of operations. So for a student, all I can say is read, learn. If there's something that you don't understand, investigate, inquire. And when you get into a working environment, explore, ask to learn other areas of the organization, because this builds up the experience of operations and will eventually be an entry into further advancement in career.
So it's very clear that if you really want to head a COO position, you need to have at least basic information. As you told, it's impossible to be master in all, but you have departmental heads in each segment, like a logistics head and IT head. But you should be able to understand what they speak and have a fair idea so that you can manage them and control them really well. And is the next step of COO is the CEO position?
Generally, COOs are deputized for CEOs.
Okay.
They can and should be able to step in as caretakers should the need ever arise.
So if I may ask about, okay, these are all CSuite employees. Everybody is interested in terms of knowing that what are the salary structures these guys are having, or how does it vary? Can you just throw some light on that if it is fine?
Yes, sure. So before I go into salary structure, I must just mention one thing. With senior positions comes great responsibility. And with that responsibility also comes liability. You're having to make decisions for the entire organization. You have to align activities on a daily basis. So based on that experience, you would expect that C-suite positions would be suitably rewarded. Now, interestingly enough, you would think that a CEO would earn the highest salary in an organization, and then it would go down on pay scales. Now, we have very interesting statistics around the globe, and I'm bringing this up because I know you like statistics and data, and also for the students out there. Interestingly enough, in the United States, when we have a look at the data, your CEO is not your highest paid individual in an organization. It goes CEO, CFO, and then Chief Operating Officer. And I don't know if that is as a result of acknowledgement of responsibility and accountability for basically keeping the show on the road. But then when we look back and we compare it to another country like India, for example, we see the exact opposite, where we see the CEOs earning the highest salary in the organization, then the CFO, and then the Chief Operating Officer. So I don't know if that is as a result of awareness or just differing expectations within geographical locations. So very interesting.
I think that's good. I think every market is different. So maybe depending upon the name, okay, the CEO, maybe that's the reason a country like India pays there, and somewhere else it might be looking at the operational efficiencies and the requirements. Now, you being a COO, and if anybody want to aspire to become a COO, so I would like to end this interview by just asking, what are the key qualities you think somebody who want to aspire to be a CEO can do a self-evaluation? So do I have these 1, 2, 3 qualities so that I can aspire to be a COO? So can you just give that as a tip for people to know that these are the minimum 3 or 4 qualities you should have? Then there's a minimum surety that you can reach that position and you can be successful in that position.
Quite a tough question. However, apart from the technical capabilities and experience and broadened knowledge base, I would say I think one of the key things of my function is agility, the ability to adapt to the changing requirements. You could tomorrow it could be a very different day to today, and how do you adapt and bring the organization and through that and set them up for future sustainability. Definitely have to be a people's person, because you'll be interacting with vendors and employees and other stakeholders, and sometimes even shareholders. So definitely be able to communicate. Always remember that you've been tasked with a function, you're there to serve. And if you keep that in mind, and I think those would be the 3 characteristics that I would say that would take you forward and let you have a very successful role as a Chief Operating Officer.
Thanks a lot, Alicia. I'm sure, I think this is something which a lot of students do have that not clarity in terms of the roles of CEO and the COO, how fancy both the positions are, the rewarding, the responsibilities, the capabilities, the qualifications, etc. needed for that. And thanks a lot for giving in-depth analysis about these particular responsibilities and roles. And thanks a lot for your time. I know you're extremely busy, and thanks a lot for making the time and coming for this particular interaction. And I wish you all the very best to see you maybe CEO, COO to CEO in future. Maybe that's what your aspirations are then. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me and on the show, and thank you for letting me share the experiences and providing more information. Thank you very much.